Come, have a seat in the Skald circle and hear the tale of The Girl Who Always Cried, as told by Mynogan. Before we begin our tale, we'd like to remind you that we release new stories for free weekly on Wednesdays on our website, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Spotify, Podbean, and more. Visit www.thescaldcircle.com for more information. Now then, this begins the tale of The Girl Who Always Cried. On the bank of a stream far in the west, Owlman lived long ago in a little house under the ground. He had very strange habits. He always kept away from the great water, and he dwelt, for the most part, in the forest. He had very few friends, and he usually went hunting by himself. He lived on toads and frogs and flies. He would say but little, and when other people sat around him talking pleasantly, he was always silent, gazing into space with wide open eyes, and trying to look wiser than he really was. Because of this, people thought he was very queer, and strange stories about him began to soon spread far and wide. It was said that he was very cruel, and that he was silent because he was always brooding over his past wickedness, or thinking about some evil deed he was soon going to do. And when children were troublesome or disobedient, their mothers always frightened them into goodness by saying, "The Owlman from the stream will come and take you if you do not mend your ways." And although the Owlman was a solitary fellow, he thus had great influence in all the land. Not far away lived a man and a woman who had adopted one daughter. Because she was the only child in the house, she was much petted, and she was never satisfied, and she cried and fretted all the time, and kept always asking for things she could not get. She disturbed all of the neighbors round about, so that they could not sleep because of her constant wailing and complaining. At last, her foster parents grew tired of her weeping, and they said, "The Owlman will carry you off if you do not stop crying." But she still pouted and fretted, and the old man of the house said, "I wish the Owlman would come and take her away." Now, the old man was a great magician, and as he wished, so it came to pass. That evening, it happened that the people were gathered at a feast of shellfish on the beach by the bright moonlight, as was their weekly custom. But the sorrowful girl would not go with the others. She stayed at home and sulked. As she sat alone in the house, old Owlman came along carrying his basket full of toads and frogs. The girl was still crying when he came in. "I have come for you," he said, as the old man wished. And he put her in his basket with the toads and frogs and carried her off. She yelled and kicked and scratched, but the lid of the basket was tightly closed, and Owlman laughed to himself and said, "Now I have a wife at last. I shall be alone no more, and the people will not now think I am so queer." So he took her to his underground house by the stream. That night, the people noticed that the girl's cries were no longer heard, and they said, "What can have cured Sourface? What can have pleased the crybaby into silence?" And the girl's foster mother wondered where she had gone. But only the old man knew what had happened. And it was as he had wished, because of his magic power. And the Owlman had taken her away. The girl was not happy in her new home, for she would not be happy in any place. She still kept up her caterwauling, and there was no peace in the house. Now, Owlman was a great hunter. Every day he went out hunting with his big basket on his arm, but he always locked his wife in the house before he went away. He was very successful with every chase, and each night he came back with his basket full of toads and frogs and field mice and flies. But his wife would eat none of them, and she threw them in his face when he offered them to her, and said in her bad temper, "I will not eat your filthy food, is not fit food for gentlefolk." And the Owlman said, "Gentlefolk indeed. You should find a more suitable name. You are not gentle. You are an evil, wild thing. But I am going to tame you." And the girl wept again, and sulked and stamped her feet in her temper. At last, the girl became very hungry, for there was very little to eat except for the food that the Owlman brought home for himself. He did gather a few berries for her, but even these did not satisfy her hunger. So she thought out a plan to escape. One day, when Owlman was away, she took some oil she found in the house and rubbed it all over her hair and face. When Owlman came home in the evening, he said, "You are very pretty tonight. What have you done to make yourself look so sleek and shiny?" And the girl answered, "I have put on my face and hair gum, which I picked from the trees last night when I went walking with you." And he said, "I should like to put some on too, for perhaps it will make me beautiful." The girl told him that if he would go out and gather some gum, she would put it on his face and hair for him. So he went out and gathered a great store of gum from the trees and brought it back to her. She melted it on a hot stove until it was balsam again, and would pour easily out. Then she said, "Shut your eyes so it will not harm your sight, and I will make your face and hair beautiful and shining like mine." Owlman shut his eyes, and the girl soon covered his face and head with the soft gum. She put it on very thick, and she said, "Keep your eyes shut until it dries, or it may blind you." Owlman did as he was told, but when the gum dried, he could not open his eyes, and while he was trying to rub it off, the girl slipped out the door and ran back to her parents, far away by the great water. Owlman scraped the gum from his face and head as best he could, and when he could open his eyes again and could see pretty well, he went out into the night in search of his wife. And as he went along, he cried, "Oh, oh, oh, where is my wife? Where is my girl? I have lost my wife. I have lost my girl." And when the people heard him calling, they thought they would play a trick on him. So they said, "Oh, she's over here! No, she's over here!" But when he entered their houses, the woman they showed him was not his wife, and he went away sorrowful. And the people all laughed at his confusion, and said, "Owlman is getting stranger and stranger every day. He is far gone in his head." Owlman went from house to house, but he could not find his wife. Then he went to the trees and searched among the branches. He pulled the trees up by their roots, thinking she might be hiding underneath. And then he looked into the salmon traps in the rivers and kicked them to pieces in his frenzy. But nowhere was his wife to be found. Then he went to the girl's house, where she was hiding, and he yelled, "Give me my wife! Give me my girl! I know she is here." But the girl's foster mother would not give her up. Then he began to tear down the house over their heads, for the old man of the house was away, and there was no one else strong enough to stop the Owlman in his rage. When the woman saw her house in danger of falling apart about her ears, she cried, "Stop! Stop! Your wife is here!" And she brought forth the girl from her hiding place. When Owlman saw her, his rage left him, and he was happy again. But just then, the old man of magic power came home. He had heard the hubbub from a great distance. When he came in and saw the great holes in the roof, and the side of his house where Owlman had torn away the logs, he was very angry, and he said to himself, "I will punish both Owlman and the girl for this night's work." And then he made a plan. He said to Owlman, "We must give you a hot bath to melt the gum, and it shall take it from your hair. For it will do you no good, and it will take all the hair off your head." And all men gladly agreed. So they filled a great bathtub with water, and heated it by placing at the bottom of it many red-hot stones, after the fashion of the Indians in those old days. But the old man put so many hot stones in the water that it was soon almost boiling with the heat, and when they put Owl Man in the tub, he was almost scalded to death, and he yelled loudly in pain. Then the old man said, "Now I will take my vengeance. You will trouble me no more. You have broken my house. Henceforth, you'll be not a man, but an owl, and you will dwell alone in the forest with few friends, and you will live always on frogs and toads and field mice, and people will hear you at night crying for your wife all over the land. But you shall never find her." Then, with his magic power, he changed him to an owl and sent him on his way. Then he said to the girl, "You have done much harm too. You have brought all this trouble upon me. Henceforth, you will not be a girl, but a fish hawk, and you will always cry and fret and scream as you have done, and you will never be satisfied." And with his magic power, he changed her into a fish hawk, and sent her out into the ocean, and there she screams always, and she is a great glutton, for she can never get enough to eat. And since that time, owl and fish hawk have not dwelt together, and have not been on friendly terms. They live far apart. An owl keeps to the forests and the mountains, while the other keeps to the sea. Thus was the old man avenged, and thus was the weeping maiden punished for her tears. And the cries of owl and fishhawk are still heard in many places, one calling for his wife, and the other screaming, unsatisfied for something she cannot get. And that is the tale of the girl who always cried. Thank you for listening to our story. If you enjoyed it, please take a look at our Patreon page to learn how you can earn great rewards while also supporting us. A special thank you to Kat for their support this month. It means the world to us. Remember, we release new stories for free weekly on Wednesdays. Find out where you can hear them on our website at www.theskaldcircle.com. Once again, thank you for listening to our story.